The reason that stuff feels so bad is because we don't have necessarily the skills to hold it in a certain way. And so I think this is one of the most life-affirming, life-enhancing skill sets out there. Welcome to Live at Your Edge. This is Ashley, and this is a space where I talk about self-evolution, healing, and growth. Today, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind ever since I created the most recent episode, which was about my experience with depression and how it was sort of the origin story for me in terms of how I found my spiritual path and healing path that I started walking many years ago. Ever since that episode, I've really been thinking a lot about what it's like to walk through periods that feel very dark, like an identity crisis or an enormous loss, like grief or a sense of meaninglessness or a dark night of the soul, a dark night of the ego, any period of internal pain. I was reflecting this week that this period of time that we're living through right now feels particularly important for all of us to have support in walking through the tough times that we are internally experiencing. And it's funny because, this has been going on ever since the beginning of our species. Periods of internal darkness is part of how we grow and evolve as human beings. It's an essential part. It is the catalyst, the crucible, like whatever word you want to use. It is part of our human condition that we walk through these periods. So it's not new, but what is new is the pace of change that's happening now. And I was thinking through other periods of great change in human history. And of course, I haven't experienced those in this life. I don't know what they felt like other than what people have described. But other periods of massive tectonic shifts in the way humans were living, like the Industrial Revolution, right? Where you had these enormous innovations in how goods were produced, the way energy was made, the invention of the electric light bulb. You have all of these enormous innovations at that time. And it was a huge period of growth for human beings because our capacity for manufacturing and energy production increased so rapidly, so fast. And yet, even then, those periods of time, because we hadn't yet had the innovations of the digital era, right, where electronics and computers have become a daily part of life, those innovations have rapidly increased the rate of change in our society. And even back in these periods, things still weren't changing as fast as they are now, right? And there were all these opportunities because of the lack of digital devices that we're carrying with us everywhere now. Back then, there were more opportunities for pausing, thinking, reflecting, contemplating. There were all these empty spaces in life, even just walking to town or sitting and waiting for something, right? Unless you had a book with you, there was all this space to pause and contemplate, right? And I'm a big believer that contemplation is how we process everything that we're going through. And so even in a moment of enormous change like the Industrial Revolution, the pace of things was still slower than it is now. And there were a lot more opportunities for pause, which is really important because that gives our systems this opportunity to settle into what is, to adapt to the changes that are happening. And our attention is so much more fractured and fragmented now than it used to be. And we all know this, right? From carrying our mobile devices around with us all the time, there's always somewhere else to be. And we're also used to multitasking with our attention. We're used to, watching something or listening to something while we're cooking, while we're cleaning, while we're taking care of our kids. Like, have you ever seen someone on an airplane who's literally like playing a game on their phone and watching something on a device and talking to their kid? Like, it's amazing actually how used to having fragmented, unfocused attention we've gotten. But because of all these factors, there are fewer and fewer opportunities for quiet, for pausing, for contemplation, for taking in and being in what's happening, for processing change, for processing what's moving right now. the reason that I'm explaining all of this is because it means that it is much harder right now in these ways to walk through periods of darkness than maybe it was in years past. Not because there's less internal suffering. I don't mean that. I just mean, I think that all of these factors I'm mentioning, the pace of change, the fractured attention we have, the complete dearth of opportunities that we often have for quiet and pausing and contemplation, I think those things make walking through a period of grief or darkness or struggle just that much harder. It's that much harder. I'm personally feeling so driven and inspired to speak more about this, like here on the platform, and to take more opportunities to talk about it, even though I know I've talked about it many times before, but I mean in more of a focused way, because I am somebody who has spent a lot of time walking through dark emotional periods of my life. And it lasted years and years and years. And I would never claim to have expertise on this, right? Like, I don't even know if it's possible to have expertise on this, right? Like, it's always a process of learning. It's always a process of growing. It's always about stepping into a new way of being with things. So like, I'm not claiming any expertise. I'm just saying that I relate. I get what it's like to feel like you are at rock bottom, to feel like you're not even sure you're going to make it. You know, like I've been at places that were so dark that I thought they were going to take me out. I couldn't see how I could possibly get through another day like that. I just couldn't imagine how I was ever going to get from there to my future. And so I'm saying that, like, I really deeply get it. I deeply understand, even though I can't possibly know, none of us can possibly know what other people's experiences are like. You know, grief is a different flavor of darkness than a huge identity crisis, right? It's a different kind of pain. And yet, there is so much overlap between them too, because those dark states, the things that our energetic field does, that our bodies do, that our minds do, in those states, there's a lot of overlap in them too. Because I spent so long in them, I feel like in order to survive, there just had to be certain things that shifted and changed. And I feel like I have learned such a huge amount of like really life-changing shit. And I would say that the knowledge and wisdom I have now is because I've walked that terrain, but it's also because I was so freaking lucky. You know, I feel like I had the privilege to work with these incredible teachers, like people who had walked terrain like that before. And I just can't even tell you how meaningful that was to me, how much of a difference that made to me to have people that got it, you know, people that understood what that felt like and how endless it felt and how impossible it felt, and who had these nuggets of like pure gold wisdom that they'd come into as a result of their journey, and that they could like transmit, right? Not necessarily even teach, but just transmit through their beingness, through the ways they saw things. I just feel like to have someone that you know of, even if you've never met them, right? Have someone even through an online space that you can connect with about that kind of shared experience, who is like just the right person at the right time. It is so essential. It was for me. It just transformed my experience. And so I'm planning to start creating and sharing more content about this topic. And so if you're somebody who doesn't feel like they resonate with that, like if you feel like, well, I'm not really in a dark period of my life, or I don't know, that sounds like really depressing, or like, you know, it may not be for you, and like, that's totally cool, right? If that content doesn't feel like it's for you, then by all means, don't tune in. But I will say that one thing about this, though, is that even if we aren't personally in a period of darkness, the truth is that we are often nearby those who are. Someone in our family, someone in our friend circle, someone in our social circle, a neighbor, another connection we have, there's usually someone who's having a tough time, right? Because it is part of our human experience. We go through these chapters of life, and some of them feel brighter, more full of hope, and some of them feel heavier and darker and really full of challenge. And so I share that because, let me just share a little bit of my own experience. My personal experience of living in our society, and I'm living here in the United States, so I can't really speak to how it is in other cultures, but here in the United States, my experience has been that most of the people that I have encountered don't often know what to do when people share that they're going through a difficult time. As somebody who spent many years having a hard time and still having a hard time and still having a hard time, like on and on for years, I've been the person who is like showing up in spaces like that a lot. And I just found it was an extremely rare person who would know how to say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you shared that with me. Would you like to talk about it more? Or who would say something like, wow, that is so hard. I've had some really tough times myself recently too, and I know how hard that can be, and I just want you to know that I'm here if you ever want to chat about it, or even just like, I'm so glad that you felt like you could share that with me. Like that kind of thing. Someone who had that kind of capacity was just so rare. And so I ended up learning that kind of skill slowly over time, not just from being a person who was struggling and thinking deeply about, well, what would I want people to say to me? But also just learning from teachers, people that know how to do this. They do exist. There are people out there who know how to be a space for pain. And so even if you're not in a dark space right now, I will just make the case for the fact that I really think all of us benefit from understanding this, from having a greater level of like fluency in darkness and depression and these periods of human pain. What's really going on in them? What things are supportive in those times? I guess it's just my personal belief that all of us will be better off the more of us that like learn how to be a space for that. Because once we learn how to be a space, like one of the first skills in my view in navigating a dark period is the skill of learning to be a space for ourselves. A loving, gentle, compassionate space for that pain. It's one of the most essential, and I will argue, also one of the more difficult things to learn in the beginning. Maybe it isn't for everybody, but I think for many people living in our society today, it's just not the posture, the skill set that we've been trained in, usually, in our earlier lives. It's not a culturally recognized or valued skill set, right? It's not. So we don't usually know how to do it well. We've usually adopted this harsh posture towards ourselves, this self-berating, self-hating even, very rough way of speaking to ourselves. So it's not something that we're all just naturally wonderful at. We can learn it though. And once we learn to do it for ourselves, suddenly we have the capacity to do it for others. And it is so powerful. I mean, if you've ever been with someone who you can feel is just in so much pain and they don't even want to like say it out loud because they know that people don't want to hear it. People don't know how to be with it, with them. It creates awkwardness. It creates this like tension. It creates weird silences. But it's because that as a society and as individuals, we just haven't necessarily grown these skills. But my experience has been that life gets so much better. so much easier when we have them. This is where the hopeful, bright lens comes in. So I know it's hard to hear, like, oh my God, this lady's going to be talking about darkness, depression, grief. Like, I mean, it just sounds like I am not tuning in for that. Like, I get that. I get that. But I don't think that it's actually such a, like, the reason that stuff feels so bad is because we don't have necessarily the skills to hold it in a certain way. And so I think this is one of the most life-affirming, life-enhancing set of capacities, nuggets of wisdom, skill sets out there. I think it's actually a really exciting thing to explore. So I just want to invite you, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your journey, your path, your experience right now, I want to invite you to keep coming back, keep tuning in for some of these topics. I may be kind of interspersing these with other episodes, other videos, but I just wanted to talk about this and why it feels like such a big, juicy topic to me right now. And so I invite you to come and hang out with me as we explore more of this territory together. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next time.